So the next part of this is the steel flask. This is going to be the housing for the investment mold that we're going to do. So I'm going to set this here. Okay, so I am taking, I don't know, about 6 to 8 ounces of investment and adding some water into it. I know a lot of my jewelry friends will probably ride me about, not measuring everything out, because it's not voodoo. It's, there's manufacturers' recommended ratios of water to investment, and I understand that. But you do this enough, and you kind of can just feel what's going to work, and you understand the properties that this investment needs to take on after you mix it up. This is important because you have to make sure there's no clumps. It has to be evenly mixed, and just a nice mixture of water and investment. And you want to go for like a pancake kind of consistency. That's a good consistency right there. It's not like super translucent or transparent. It still has an opaqueness to it. Coats your fingers real nice. That's what we want. And you only have a certain amount of time to work with this stuff before it starts to harden up. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all the air out of this using this vacuum chamber. So I'm going to, this is bubbling, it's bubbling, and I want this to just kind of look like it's boiling. I want all that air to just work its way out. That way you have a nice, smooth, satiny kind of finish when it's done. And when I pour this investment into this flask, there's not going to be the air bubbles that, when cast, just look like little beads that have attached themselves to the piece I'm working on. It just creates more work. So that's probably good. And so a technique that I was shown by a gentleman who used to, he worked for, I believe, the Air Force or the Navy, and he worked in their dental lab for 3 years. And a lot of gentlemen will pour the investment into the flask and then re-vacuum the flask. Well, he showed me this technique using a vibrating table and just, pouring the investment in a nice little tiny, kind of like just a tiny waterfall, holding it at the side, and then as you pour it, it fills in the design, or the wax model, and you won't have to worry about any air bubbles. And I've had great success doing it this way. This works. I have observable, repeatable results, and I can demonstrate them every time. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating the negative. This is the first process of creating the negative of that wax. So what's going to happen with this, I'm just going to let this ride on this vibrating table, let any kind of air bubbles just work their way up to the top, let it sit for 1 hour, and then I'm going to put it in my kiln. Now, there's basically a staggered heating regimen that this will do. And you let it bake. I let mine bake at 325 for 2 hours. Let it ramp up at a rate of 600 degrees per hour to 700 degrees. And so it usually takes about a half hour to get to that temperature. Let it sit for 1 hour. And then it ramps up to 950. And then it'll stay at 950 for an hour. And then it goes up to 1350. And it'll stay there for an hour. And that's at a steady ramp at 600 degrees per hour. Now, the first segment of that dries out the investment. It gets, basically evaporates all the water out. You can't have any moisture in this once you get up to higher temperatures, because any water left in this will explode in your flask, and then everything's gone, and you got to start all over again. But once you get to 1350, that's what hardens and strengthens the investment to be able to withstand all the pressure that it's going to be going through in this casting process. So once it reaches that burnout state at 1350, I take it down to 1,000 degrees. That's my casting temperature for 18 karat yellow gold. And then, yeah, it'll be thrown at about that temperature. It gets a little bit hotter with the flame being applied to it, but so I haven't seen any new air bubbles come out of here for a bit. So at this point, vibrating this is redundant. At this point, we're going to let it sit for an hour, and when we come back tomorrow, we'll have this ready to go to cast, and it'll be really exciting. So.